Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 5 of the Power to the Flower podcast. I'm your host, Nairobi. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the intersections on immigration, cannabis policy, drug enforcement, and deportation, or more specifically, policies called repatriation procedures. Though cannabis may be legal in many U.S. states, a lot of the stakes are really high for non US citizens. This may be whether you have legal permanent residency or someone who is in the US under temporary protective status. You could even be at risk if you are a visa holder, right? So if you are here on a student visa, a work visa, a temporary visa for whatever reason, it could be a sports visa, it could be a music visa, it could be a performance visa. Whatever the visa type, those documents are legal. But if you overstay your visa or if you're up for renewal of your visa and you have participated in the cannabis industry in some way, I suggest that you go ahead and reach out to a lawyer, either one that you probably already have or to some free legal resources, which I will be giving in this episode. At this current moment, I am not yet a lawyer, so I cannot give you legal advice. One of those legal resources will be the Mirror Coalition. They're based out of Massachusetts, but also the Lawyers for Civil Rights. With new aggressive ICE enforcement and the city of Los Angeles erupting in protest as a result of these ICE raids, I want folks to be equipped with some of the knowledge about what the repercussions of working in the cannabis industry might be adjacent to non US citizenship status, along with the use of cannabis, even in states where cannabis is legal. This is especially true for states like Massachusetts or states like California or even New York, where there are large immigrant populations. Repatriation is just another word for the simplified terms. I'm going to say this in Spanish: a regresar a tu patria, or to return to your patria. Your patria is your patriarchal place or your home, a fatherland, if you will. So the repatriation laws or policies that you'll see with regards to deportation, either by force or voluntarily sending folks back to their home country. So there's different ways that the Trump administration has tried to do this by implementing a self-deportation app so that folks who are here can self-deport if they wanted to, or to be forcefully removed under the law. In this episode, I'm going to break down how even using cannabis or having cannabis as a simple possession can be used against you if you are applying for citizenship to be naturalized, or if you're applying through any different other authorized stay in the United States. And I also want to give credence to this t-shirt that I'm wearing. It's called Black Art Matters by an artist named Willie Cole. Willie Cole is a contemporary postmodern eclectic artist, but he also has a special piece that he wrote in High Times called Legal. And there is some art associated with that piece that he wrote, but specifically the art is to illustrate those who have been affected by the war on drugs historically and what their faces might look like, along with the states that have legalized, are finely printed within that piece of artwork. What's happening in LA today is very eerily similar to two historical events that I just want to point out to. The first was in the 1930s with repatriation laws that took into effect in the municipality of Los Angeles. There were laws that sent people back to Mexico, and during that time with those raids, the federal government, along with the local police enforcement, were sending Mexican Americans off to trains and oftentimes conducting raids during large gatherings to be able to grab as many Mexicans as they could and deport them back to Mexico. That was in the 1930s. And in the 1990s, in the 1992 Rodney King riots, we saw that there was protesters who united against police brutality and racial profiling by policing. What we're seeing today is a fusion of two things. We're seeing those two events kind of mirror each other, where the Donald Trump administration has decided to deploy the National Guard onto these protesters using tear gas and crowd dispersement tactics. The three main laws that I want to reference is the Marijuana Taxation Act of 1937 and the 1930s repatriation laws, which we had already covered. But basically, with the war on drugs today, we see that the drug laws are used often to deport people in the Immigration and Nationality Act. The Immigration and Nationality Act is what determines what grounds people are deportable by. So if you're a temporary visa holder or if you're a LPR, a legal permanent resident, you may be subject to some of these laws. And you have to be very mindful of what your consumption in cannabis may be. There have been previous cases where folks have been not only deported for their cannabis use, but deported for simple possession or deported under the moral clause or the good character clause in the Immigration and Nationality Act. Here's a quick question for those of us who are US born citizens. Did you know that the process to become a naturalized citizen in the United States requires a good moral character review? Well, now you know. Basically, what this means is for folks who are looking to become US citizens, they have to go through a different set of questions and processes that determine whether or not they have good moral character, or what the US would agree is a set of belief systems that would benefit the United States should you become a US citizen. So if you consume cannabis and you are not yet a US citizen and you are under certain non-citizenship status, I highly suggest that you talk to a lawyer. If you decide to engage in any of these activities, they're technically still federally illegal under the Controlled Substance Act and determines whether or not folks can actually become citizens and actually determines what level of visas are permitted as well. Along with the CPB, which is the Customs Border Patrol and ICE Immigration Enforcement, these organizations are on the federal level that individually deal with immigration cases. But ultimately, it does come back to judges on whether or not they agree with the verdict that the USCIS has determined. In 2019, the USCIS determined that even admitting that you have used cannabis is something that can deem you as inadmissible into the US and can actually get your visa revoked if you are in a visa, and certainly would bar you from trying to become a US citizen. So these are the things to keep in mind, because this has actually happened in real life cases where a young woman actually disclosed that she was using cannabis in a medical form and was then deemed to be inadmissible, which led to the revocation of her status. And these are the type of things that folks need to be wary of, because where we are at in the United States with regards to our immigration policy, we have a federal administration that is very specific and clear about not having any mercy towards immigrants that are looking to stay here and have any drug offenses. Okay? We don't want you to be held liable, especially in your process to apply to become a citizen, if you're choosing to go down that path. But you should know what are some of the risks involved, especially if you're in a state that is a democratic leaning state that has sanctuary status and is also a state that is a med state or a recreational state. Things to consider, because you are more than likely wanting to consume or have the access to and may think it's okay because of the state's laws. But if you are a non US citizen, you should totally turn away from even engaging with cannabis at this time or for future use, according to US law. And any type of enforcement in these cases will be subject to the Trump administration and what the direction of his course towards immigrants on this level with cannabis will be. So let's talk about who's most at risk here. Those who are DACA recipients, temporary protected status holders, visa recipients, non US citizens of any kind, whether you're undocumented or even if you are actually a legal permanent resident or a green card holder. If you are engaging in the cannabis industry in any which way, in any cannabis related activity, despite your state's legality status, then you are liable of any potential risk factors with regards to the violation of the CSA, good moral clause, and any other policies that could bar you from any potential future status in the US. Okay. So I want folks to be wary of that. Those particularly in vulnerable states, like I mentioned before, that are democratic leaning or have sanctuary status, you should be wary of your protections. And for those who are looking to apply, it's 5 years at least prior to your application for becoming a US citizen, a naturalized citizen, through that process to keep in mind for your application. Admitting to any marijuana possession, use, or activity can actually bar you and your family from getting any status in the US and potentially being revoked and deported or sent back to your home country if that is something that they choose to go based off of. We have seen in similar cases where there was a situation where a cannabis dispensary owner was actually barred from becoming a US citizen for having a cannabis business in a legal state. So, because of this, she was deemed as being an illicit drug trafficker. Because of this, this is why folks need to be mindful of their level of interest and activity under these particular provisions. We don't want you to get your green card revoked, your citizenship status denied, or even to be deported just because of your cannabis use. So, por favor, tengan cuenta. All of this coupled with the 12 country travel ban that we're seeing coming out of the Trump administration, we now know that the immigrant communities across the United States are under attack. They're in trouble. So there's a lot that we can do, and we can do a lot of these things together. Number one, know your rights. Attend Know Your Rights trainings, as you will see that the National Immigration Center is a resource for folks who are immigrants and need to know a little bit more about their rights. But just in general, we should be attending Know Your Rights trainings that are held by local immigrant groups. If you need some resources, I will put them in my link tree so that you could follow along. I do want to make sure is that we're protecting our immigrant communities by helping them understand the laws that affect them directly. So here's what you can do if you're a part of one of these immigrant community members. Well, first off, don't smoke weed and don't talk about weed on social media. You don't want any of these things to be used against you while you are applying to become a citizen or to directly affect your non-citizen status in this country. The other thing you want to do is if you feel you're in trouble, reach out to those legal resources I mentioned, nationwide networks that are doing work like the ACLU, as I mentioned before, and different other organizations like the Lawyers for Civil Rights. Folks that are working on immigration can help you find and guide you to the best recourse for your situation. But here's the big picture and why it all matters. The point of this podcast, as I have mentioned before, is to highlight how cannabis policies affect Black and Brown communities, both historically, in the present, and potentially the future. Immigrant communities are both Black and Brown, and we know that these cannabis policies are particularly targeting them and their immigration status. So please stand clear and let this be a voice of reason for you as you're navigating the world that is now the post Donald Trump world and immigration that is incredibly conservative and very, very detrimental to those who are trying to live a life here but are very unclear what their direction is in terms of their immigration status. And we're seeing that there's a general trend about racialized policing to our communities as it relates to drug use, and immigration and cannabis intersect in that way, along with the criminalization of Black and Brown individuals due to drug arrests as well. This issue is not going to go away. The Trump administration is shy of only a few months in his 4-year term, and he has been adamant about making sure that he cracks down on immigration cases that are related to drug offenders and criminals, according to what his administration has highly interpreted from the Immigration and Nationality Act. I also want folks to see this. This is not a trend. This is not a trend. This is something that real people are fighting for. We're fighting for equal access. And those who are in the front lines that can be, continue to stay there and find ways to help your community, the ones who are most vulnerable and at risk, be protected from some of these things if you can. Obviously, providing resources is one of the best ways we can give back to our community. So, as I mentioned before, please reach out if you have any questions about what one of these things could do for you, and make sure that you're asking the right folks in your community on what the risks might be for themselves as well as you. And in an ironic twist of events, the Republican Party's darling has had the Republican playbook used upon him now. So, usually, as you have seen, the trends have been in conservative governments to use drug abuse or drug use as a means to deport a person. Now, The tables are turning on Elon Musk, where he was once favored by Donald Trump. He is now being considered on whether or not he should be deported, according to some reports. Episodes like this is why I'm so grateful for folks who tune in on every episode and just stay engaged with me to talk about what I report on this podcast. It's important that I use this and that our community uses this podcast as a tool to be able to equip one another. Each one teach one. We are doing this for each other and making sure that everybody has what they need to survive these modern times. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 5 of season 2's Power to the Flower podcast. Bye.